Hello and welcome to this edition of Active Living. Today we're very fortunate to have Jim Roback with us. Jim is a world traveler. He's just recently returned from a trip to Turkey, and we're going to be talking to Jim today about all of the things that he saw in Turkey. Jim, welcome to our show.
Glad to be here today, George.
Hey, it's great to have you. Let's talk about your Turkey trip and exactly what happened while you're over there. Tell us about some of the highlights that you saw while you were there, and a little bit about your trip.
Okay, if you look at the background of our screen here, that we're going to try to follow the route from Istanbul going west to Troy, and then south toward Izmir, then kind of east toward Ankara, and then back to Istanbul. So this will be kind of the route that we'll travel as we go through this tour of Turkey.
Great. So you flew into Istanbul, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And it's about a nine and a half hour flight from New York City.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Not bad at all. That's better than going to East when you go to Asia, which is about 14 and a half hours.
Oh yeah, that's a killer.
That's a crimper.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so you landed in Istanbul. So what was exciting about Istanbul?
Well, there's many things to see in Istanbul. We got there about 2:30 in the afternoon. We freshened up a little bit, then we decided to go on our own for the rest of the afternoon, which we did. And the first thing we visited, first thing we did was we transferred some money from the American dollars into the Turkish, which is lira.
Okay.
And so changed $200, and on our way to the mosque there, we were heading there to see the, basically a lot of mosques in Istanbul. And I got ripped off for $35, the first thing the pickpocket got me. So
really?
Yeah, I was very careful, and it's the first time I've been hit, and I'm usually very careful, but he was real sneaky. He wanted to sell one of these books like this here on Turkey. And my partner said, well, you got 10 lira. So I took the money out, and I was going to give the guy 10 lira. He grabbed 100 lira instead of 10. I said, no, you're starting to put in his pocket. I said, no, we got it back there. But unfortunately, he grabbed 3 bills. He had 100 and a 50 and a 20. So actually, I got the 100 back, but I didn't get the other 70 back, which was $35 equivalent American dollars. So
the moral of the story is you got to be very careful when you're traveling
absolutely.
Overseas.
Anytime you travel anywhere in the world, you got to be very careful and don't take as much money. I just exchanged it down at the hotel, so didn't figure I'd get ripped out, but I did.
Hey, let me ask you a question now. I noticed that you brought some tea with us, tea today. Can you tell me a little bit about why we have the tea?
Well, that's interesting in itself too, because everywhere you go in Turkey, no matter where you go on the road, when you're traveling between rest stops and everything, they always have tea, and people have conversations. We're in the Grand Bazaar, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, that they have runners that take tea to all these various booths there for the people. So this is a nice conversation. You're having tea, and you're having a nice conversation, you're relaxed. So these are nice little tea cups that they have. It's small cups here. They got a nice little saucer that goes along with it, and it's kind of a neat thing. And everywhere you go, and it's 1 lira, which is 50 cents everywhere you go. So everybody's drinking tea in Turkey.
That's great. It's really nice here on the set too.
It sure is. Nice and relaxing.
Great. Okay, so now you're in Istanbul, and you talked about this Grand Market or?
Yeah, the Grand Bazaar, right.
Grand Bazaar.
Yeah. Some of the key things, you can start with the Grand Bazaar. We hit that, and there's something like 4,200 stores in there.
Wait, 4,200
stores in this Grand Bazaar. It's like an old building. It had so many different aisles and such. They had something like 2,000 jewelry stores, about 700 carpet places you can buy, and the rest were just a number of souvenirs, shirts, you name it. Anything you want to buy, they had it there.
And this is all in one building?
One building, yeah, and there's aisleways going which way, and you get lost in there, basically.
Wow.
Tremendous, and the amount of people in there is just unbelievable.
So about half of these were jewelry?
2,000 were their jewelry stores, yeah. If you wanted to buy jewelry, you had your choice there.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Fantastic.
And then the rugs, I mean, gosh, 700, I can't believe 700 rug places. And typically, what's interesting about the rug place is that most of the rugs they sell are not new, they're old. They're like 20, 30, 40 years old. They say the older the rug is, the more expensive it is. I would not be able to tell the difference. I asked the guy, he says, why don't you put a price on these? He says, well, they're all so different, so it's always difficult to negotiate a price on rugs in Istanbul. So along with that, I mean, the Grand Bazaar was just phenomenal. Then nationally, you got 3 more sites that are just unbelievable. Nationally, the Blue Mosque, which is the Sultan's Mosque, which has 6 minarets. And most of the time, the minarets that have 4 are related to the Sultan.
Okay.
Now, if it has 2 minarets, then it's the Sultan's mother. But every mosque has to have a minimum of 1 minaret. But the Blue Mosque has 6 minarets, so he went over and above. He went 2 additional ones.
So this is a special mosque.
Special. It's the biggest and best, and it's called the Blue Mosque, and it's fabulous inside. It's just ornate and just unreal amount of people they can put in there.
I was just going to ask you, how many people do you think it would seat?
Probably, I bet you, I would guess probably 10,000 there.
Wow.
I would think. So it's huge. And then beyond, on the other side of the street is what they call the Hagia Sophia, which used to be a Catholic or a Christian church, and it was built back in 347 BC. And then it was turned into a mosque later on, and it was actually destroyed during an earthquake in about 500 AD, and then it was 500 AD, and then it was rebuilt back in between 1558 and 1562. And you have Christian pictures of Christ and the Virgin Mary there in the church and the mosaics. And really a beautiful, beautiful city as far as it's a museum today. It's not a mosque or a Christian church.
Okay.
And then between these two is what they call, there's an underground cistern where the water came from for Istanbul.
Okay.
And it was incredible. The columns there that were in there, it was like a city in itself. And so in that small space, you have Egyptian obelisks there. You have, they call it the Hippodrome, where a lot of this stuff was portrayed as having events there back there in those centuries. And also during this time, they had the Korean contingency. They were putting on plays and acts and things of that nature all day long, talking about Turkey. I'm sorry, about Korea. And it was very fabulous.
They were there, the Koreans were there while you were there?
While we were there, yeah. They were putting all these plays all day long. So
No
you
kidding.
can go there and see these, and it was great. It was super.
Huh. So in addition to, let's say, the items we've just talked about in Istanbul, was there anything else that you guys did that was kind of special?
Well, just traveling around the city, the people were so friendly. In the city, about 10 million people. So of the total population of Turkey, which is 71 million, 10 million reside in Istanbul. And there's, I think it's something like 65% Muslim, and then there's others, I don't know what the rest of them were, but 65% is Muslim.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so many things to see. That just traveling, the taxis and the buses and things of that nature. It was just a unique experience.
Okay. Now from there, where did you go?
Okay, actually after the next day, we actually traveled by bus to the city of Troy. We crossed the Dardanelles, which is interesting because Turkey is in two continents. The northern part of Istanbul is in Europe. The rest of Turkey is actually in Asia Minor, so it's the only country in the world that's in two continents.
Really?
Yes, and so traveling on to Troy, this is where the Trojan horse is at, the wooden horse, so we saw that. You were able to go up on top of it and take some pictures while you're up there. It's probably 3 stories high or better, and I guess it was used for a movie, and it's there in the city of Troy right now.
I noticed you got a little trinket here, a little glass. It looks like it's got a picture of the Trojan horse on the front.
Right. That's where I was purchased there in Troy, right.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It was really nice. It was one of the first ones I saw, and I liked the gold emblazoned around the cup and the washer there.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
So you got a chance to climb up the horse and get into the horse.
Yes, we did, and that was interesting. And fortunately, the tourist season was really not at its height, so there's only about 10,000 people generally where we went, so it was not heavily populated as it would normally be, so it was nice to be able to see these things and take your time and not be bothered and jostled by tourists. So it was pretty neat.
Right.
Pretty neat, yes.
I love this tea, Jim. It's really good.
Oh, it's a good thing to enjoy as you're talking here. So
yeah.
Yeah, then the next city we visit was actually Izmir, where the city of Ephesus is. And this was the old Greek city, and then it was the stronghold of the Roman Empire at one time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting there because they determine the size of the city by the size of the amphitheater, the Colosseum.
Okay.
In Ephesus, it has a seating capacity of 25,000. They figured the city was actually 10 times that amount, so it was a city about 250,000 people.
Even back in those days.
Back in those days. So every city, depending on the size of the amphitheater, was the determination of how many people lived there. So it was 5,000, it'd be like 50,000 if they could sit into the amphitheater.
So they figured the city was about 250,000?
250,000. The Colosseum was huge, and actually, like any Colosseum in the Roman Empire, I mean, if you're down at the bottom, you can go to the top, and you can actually hear the person's voice. We heard people singing. They had a choir group down there. They sang, and we could hear them up there as we were near the top of the Colosseum. It was kind of real neat there. I
know the acoustics in those places are fantastic.
It is fabulous.
Because I visited one when I was in France. Mm-hmm. It was done by the by the Romans, and it was fantastic.
It sure is. And
you could put your singer up on the stage without any amplification, and 10,000 people could hear it.
Could hear it,
no
absolutely.
Problem.
And this is a great city because it has all the ways as far as the columns that were there. It has the library, and actually the Temple of Artemis was there until the earthquake knocked it down. It was one of the one of the 7 wonders of the world in the ancient times was the Temple of Artemis there. And so it has a lot of history there. They had the great library that was the center of the city there.
Okay.
And also they had what they had, the House of Pleasure.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So that was neat for those who wanted to indulge. And they had a footprint on one of the streets there in which they had the footprint of the goddess of Eutychius. And if you wanted to have a house of pleasure, she would say, here's on the stone, meet me at the corner there and we'll have some pleasure. So kind of interesting. So a nice little city. So it had all kinds of things. And then they had a communal bathroom. I mean, you had like all your toilet seats right there, like a 15 in a row on one side and 15 on the other. So, and they had a great system for eliminating the waste of the city. And the water would trickle down and take it away. So
really?
They had the engineering well established back in those times also.
Even back in the Roman times?
Yes, I mean, they were pretty sharp engineers, let me tell you.
Okay. Okay, now you're at, what was the name of the city again?
It was Ephesus.
Ephesus, okay.
Yes.
Now you're going to?
Now our next city we're going to head to was what we call Pamukale. This is what they call a cotton castle. These are thermal springs. They're kind of the, it's a water that comes down out of the mountains there, and it's all with salt. And then you have these warm waters. It has a temperature between 110 to about 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ooh, that's pretty hot.
And people were in there, and they were, soaking into the salt because they're supposed to help your body and such. And people were walking in it, and so it was really neat to just put your feet in there, and people had their bathing suits on, and they were actually staying in the water there, bathing. So not say bathing, but just soaking up the thermal springs. Yeah. And it's a huge area also. I mean, it's fabulous, and it's called the Cotton Castle, what they call it, because it's all white. So it's really neat, really neat.
And so you actually went into the water with all the,
I only went to my ankles, up to my knees, and other people had their bathing suits. I brought my bathing suits, but I didn't go in, so I wish I would have, but it would have been pretty neat to do it.
Yeah.
So it was an awesome sight there, an awesome sight.
Great. Okay.
And then we went to what we call the port city of Antalya, and this is
the poor city?
Port city of Antalya. Port
okay.
City, I'm sorry. Port city of Antalya. It's one of the oldest towns along the Mediterranean, and has a great bazaar also there as you go there. It's right in the Mediterranean. This is where we actually swam in the Mediterranean. Very warm water, and year-round you could swim in that part of the country, yes.
Wow.
And kind of interesting, it's an old city. It's the only day that we had rain for about 20 minutes.
Okay.
We were on the bus, fortunately, and by the time we got off the bus, as we got into town, the rain had stopped, so we visited the old city. Then we took a boat ride to see the coastline, saw caves and waterfalls, and a lot of sailboats out there, and Chinese junkets. So there's a little bit of everything you can imagine in this little town of Antalya. And the boardwalk they have along the Mediterranean, we walked after dinner one night for about 30 minutes. You could have kept walking all the way into town, which would have taken about an hour and a half. But we just did about a 30-minute walk. It was kind of really interesting that night because they had people in the restaurant there smoking these, bakis, what they call them. They smoke these pots where they got tobacco or something there, and they're sitting at the restaurant and they're smoking this stuff, so very interesting.
What were they smoking? Do you know?
Don't really know. I don't really want to care to know what was in there, but I'm sure it was good for them.
Yeah, it was, huh?
I'll bet it was. I bet it was really good. So, but it's a nice little town. Most cities in Turkey are very, very clean. You don't see trash littered any place. I mean, they're very, very environmentally conscious of what.
Now, this sounds like a resort city.
It kind of is, yes.
Yeah.
It's an old town, and like I say, it's on the Mediterranean, so a lot of people come there because year-round it's warm, so it never gets cold. Like other parts of Turkey, I mean, you have snow, like in Ankara, you can go ski in there, so Turkey has a lot of varied temperatures.
Okay, so it sounds like they may have quite a few mountains there. They can go skiing.
I don't know if it's really mountains there get that high. It's probably I would say maybe up to 3,000 meters, around 10,000 feet.
Oh, that's pretty good size.
Yeah, it's pretty good size, yeah. So it's a well diversified terrain in Turkey.
Jim, can you tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the items that we have here? I know the tea is great. I love it.
That's good.
But how about some of these other items that we have here? What is this here?
Okay, those are figs that we purchased, and they're very good. They give you a lot of samples there, so we had to buy some, and they are totally fresh, and they're very excellent. And so had to buy a couple packages, and they were very expensive, like about $1.50, so very inexpensive there.
Okay, great. Then we got other items here. We've got this this beautiful bowl.
This was very interesting. There's an underground city where they make this pottery, and they have everything from values of, you know, maybe $10, $5 way up to, you know, $15,000 for the art, for the pottery they have in there. It's underground basically. It's about 55 degrees in there. It's amazing what they do down in there. And this is from the pottery called Avanis, and it's a family-owned company. It goes back like 5 generations, and they make it out of the red clay out of the Red River there, which is near the facility there.
Okay. Boy, that's a beautiful bowl.
They are beautiful. And I think those are only about $10 each, so it's really inexpensive.
And I know you never touch liquor or anything like that, but look at this shot glass here. This is really nice.
That one is a real neat one with all its mosque and such on there, kind of gold.
It looks like it's gold. It's gold that they've used on the outside here.
I normally purchase these for a couple of teachers in Oakview Middle School. Everywhere I go, they ask me to buy these shot glasses. So normally I buy it for them. I have to take it to them yet. And then my sister-in-law collects them also. So I always pick up 3 or 4 and then bring them back and give it to the ladies.
Beautiful. Then you've got all these elephants over here.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I don't know why they had elephants there. I bought it because my wife wanted some elephants when I went to Africa, so I'll buy some more elephants. And why they have elephants there versus camels, I'm not sure why, but I thought it was neat, and it was very inexpensive again. They're made out of onyx, and it was a nice little gift. And again, I think it was like $4 or $5, so not too expensive as far as gifts are concerned. Then you have the thimbles over there, which I normally purchase for Dora, who was a senior here at the Orion Center, and everywhere I go, she'd like to have a thimble, and so I normally buy them, and I haven't seen her. I guess Max has not been too well lately, so but I have to go ahead and deliver them, but I always bring her back a thimble from each country that I visit.
Okay, great. And
then we have naturally this pomegranate tree. This is kind of interesting too, because we had it in one of the stores. They gave it to us. It was chilled, and it was really good. It's in these same glasses here that we have here. They put the chilled pomegranate juice in this little glass, and you drank it. It was kind of refreshing. So it was kind of so I had to buy a package of the pomegranate juice there. And these were some of the tickets that, as you enter some of the events, as far as the museums and such, they have these little passes that I basically kept here. So kind of a memento for being the various places that we visited in Turkey there. And actually, photographs, you know, I probably took 1,000, so I only
you got a few there, Jim.
Developed about 250 of them there. And actually, the book itself is kind of a neat book, because I bought this one because it really basically followed the path that we had on the map there, started from Istanbul all the way back to Istanbul. So it was a perfect memento book to really see where you're at.
Right. Well, let's continue the trip. I mean, we got a couple more cities to go yet.
Right. So the next city we visited was Cappadocia. It's really on the Silk Road that came from India and China. And everybody normally stopped there. The caravans, they had this huge fort or kind of a way station that they could protect themselves in the evening. So they would come in there, they'd have to pay a toll, they bring their animals in and everything they brought from India or China. And so they're locked gates, and they would come in there, had a little small mosque because they wanted prayer and bed. Then at night, they would basically sleep with their animals because it was very cold in that area in the wintertime.
So they brought the animals inside?
Inside also, their camels and everything, and they slept with the animals because they had the heat from the animals with the fur, I guess fur, whatever you want to call what's on a camel. Yeah, it was very interesting, and it was a huge place there where they could actually be safe from robbers and such.
Yeah.
And so that was a safe haven, and the little mosque inside was called the Kosk Mesjid. So it's a little temple there where they could pray, actually, so it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
Okay, then from there was the next day was the most interesting. This is when we took the balloon ride. I had to give up about 5:30 in the morning, so we had to get there about 6:30 and prepare to go the balloon ride. And there was probably, at that time we even got there, was already 100 balloons in the air, so by the time we had finished, there was probably about 200 balloons in the air.
200 balloons?
200 balloons are in the air, actually around this whole Cappadocia area, where it's kind of a rock formation that's caused from the volcanoes and the erosion that occurred over the last 10, 20,000 years. And it's a very interesting landscape. It's almost like a moon, basically, but very, very unusual. And we were traveling at about 1,000 meters, about 3,000 feet to 3,500 feet above the ground.
Really?
Yes, and then...
And how big are these balloons?
Well, we can have, the gondola fitted 20 people.
20 people?
20 people. Could carry up to 8,000 pounds.
Wow, most of the ones I've seen here is like 4 or 5 people.
4 or 5. They can carry up to 20 people.
These must be huge balloons.
They were very huge. I mean, by the time he actually pumped it up with the propane and got it going, it's about a half an hour. And the guy did a magnificent job in landing. Normally you have to brace yourself. This guy came in like a 747, just came in and eased it right on the ground. You have to find a flat spot. As he's traveling around, he's looking for a place to land. And he found this place, and then they have their chase crew there also to make sure as he's coming down, they could, kind of brace it once we land. And then they have to get the ropes and then, anchor it down to the trailer, which they did. So we had a very soft landing. Didn't have any bruises or anything like that, so it turned out very, very nicely.
It's fantastic.
It was.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
But when you look at the ground in this picture, I mean, it looks like you could have a pretty rough landing there if you're not careful.
Yes, you could. And that's why he had to search for a landing spot. So
yeah.
he had. I mean, it wasn't perfect. I mean, it was kind of like a little uphill like this here, but it wasn't a very big space he landed on, and so they have to pick a spot, and the wind determines where they go. Basically. So it's a very interesting method of piloting those balloons. I mean, this one guy was doing, I mean, he'd blow the torch every so I know, raise it up and then down with the propane, to maneuver this thing around. So he did a super job, job. And we had a nice little champagne drink after we landed.
Oh, yeah.
The flowers and the cake and all that. It was really a wonderful experience to choreograph the whole thing. They did a fabulous job. And like I said, it was $200, which is very inexpensive.
Yeah.
It was actually in Oxford, it cost you $190 here if you want to go up. About the same amount of time. And it's about an hour.
Okay, now you've done the balloon ride, and is there anything else in that particular that area that you?
Well, the next thing was we went to what we call the rock formations. This is in the city of Nevishire, and these were places where people lived. There was over 10,000 of people that lived in the hills. They actually carved out homes in the rock from these formations and such there.
Okay.
And they had temples in there. They had their rooms, their dining rooms, everything else, and wasn't very big spaces, but I guess protected from the elements and such. And but I couldn't believe over 10,000 people would live in these particular hills and valleys that they had. And it goes all the way back to the Roman times, because as you walk through some of these underground cities, they had these narrow passageways that if the Romans were to attack them, they made them very narrow so they could kill them one at a time.
Okay.
So they were very smart, because if you get 3 or 4 people coming at you, it'd be pretty hard to defend yourself.
Right.
Well, in this case, they made it very narrow, and then they could kill them. And then also, if they got inundated, they had these big rolling stones like a millstone, so they could block off a passageway.
Okay.
So they could protect themselves. So they're pretty, again, good engineers and smart people, how to protect themselves.
Right.
And so these were very ancient cities that in the landscape. And what interesting also was in one of the areas they had what they call Pigeon Valley. And of those places where the people had vacated, pigeons roost there at night.
Okay.
So once a year, each year, they go in and gather all the pigeon poop and use that for fertilizer on the farmland.
Okay.
So they do that once a year, so it's good use of the environment, okay?
Right.
Good fertilizer, very inexpensive.
Yeah.
So, but so many good things to see in this particular area also. We went to what they called Open Air Museum, which had a fantastic collection of Roman statues and artifacts and ivory and such, and it was really just phenomenal what they did as far as the artifacts they found and preserved them. So that was really very, very nice to see these particular museums. Again, Turkey has a lot of history. There's no question about it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's
a lot of history.
It's kind of like the crossroads, isn't it, between the east and the...
That it is, because it's pinch point through, go through the Dardanelles, which, basically you start from the Dead Sea, you go through the Straits of Bosphorus into the Sea of Marmara, and then through the Dardanelles into the Mediterranean Sea. And that's a very strategic place as far as Turkey is concerned.
Right.
They have strategic, from Russia to the Mediterranean, so there's a lot of wars that occurred, especially at Gallipolis there, where the English and that would try to overtake that area back in the First World War, before the First World War, but they never succeeded. The Turkish army beat them back.
Really?
So they lost a lot of people. Yes, a lot of people.
Okay, now you're in this rural area, and are you moving now back towards Istanbul, or is
yes,
there?
now we visit the capital of Turkey, which is Ankara.
Okay.
And a city that started with only about 20,000 people in the First World War. Today it's 2.2 million.
You're kidding.
So it's grown that far and that much in a matter of, 60, 70 years there or more. And the unique part about Ankara, it's the capital, and they have the mausoleum there, which is basically new. It was for the first president of Turkey when they got liberated, and his name was Kemal Ataturk. His first name was, Mustafa Kemal. And so, but they call him Kemal Ataturk, which is Turkish, and And really, it's so unique. They had the changing of the guard there, which we saw and witnessed there. They had all these sides. They changed the guards, not almost like Arlington, where they only had 2. Here they had like 8 different transitions where they start from one end of the grounds all the way around. So they had people stationed at various parts around this mausoleum.
Okay.
So they had the Coast Guard, the Navy, and the Air Force and such. So each time they would move, they would sit 2 here, and then they move on and take 2 more over here, and then there's like 10 people in the changing the guard.
So it's a real performance that they go through when they do the change.
Yes, it was a very good performance. And including in that was that you have a lot of people who get married, and they actually have to visit the crypt of this Kemal Ataturk, because they think it's good luck. So everybody goes there. We saw people in wedding dresses, and they go up to the sarcophagus which is in the building there. So, and he has all his cars and a lot of artifacts that he collected over the number of years were in the mausoleum there. So, very nice museum. And
cars.
Cars, yeah, a lot of cars he had. Yeah.
Any American cars?
I didn't see any American cars.
No,
mostly European such.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it was a very nice place to end, we'll say, Ankara. The only place in Ankara which was different than any part of Turkey was the fact we saw some poverty areas.
Okay.
It was very, very much dirty, and it was the only place in all Turkey we saw something that was...
I was going to ask you about that. They've grown from just a few thousand people up to
2.2 million.
2.2 million. What do these people do?
That's a lot of it's tourism, a lot of it's tourism nationally, and then actually various cities have, for example, like pottery. In some cities they have the carpet weaving in some of the cities, and Ankara it's just a lot of tourism and commerce, basically. So that's what they have there. And it's close to the Black Sea, which again you get some tourists that come in. So tourists is one of the biggest, parts of Turkey as far as their economy is concerned.
Okay.
So, and we had no problem in Turkey. I know they had some situation there a couple of months ago where they had some uprising in Istanbul, but we saw none of that any place, anywhere, very safe. We very seldom saw anybody as far as army people, other than the one place in Istanbul we saw a couple of guards that had the actual machine guns. That was the only place there was the Topkapı Palace, which was built back in 1500 in Istanbul, which is right on the Sea of Marmara there in the Straits of Bosphorus.
Okay.
So with that, after Ankara, we ended up going back to Istanbul, and we spent the last day there. And from there, we went back and did a little bit of sightseeing and such. And so that kind of made the trip very worthwhile. I mean, it was sometimes excruciating because some of the bus rides from one city to another was 7 to 8 hours. So
really,
there's some really long bus rides, but good bus ride. We had a lot of good people, very varied amount of people we had there from different parts of the United States. So it was good to talk to these people and hear their stories. And we had probably about 14 Asian people on our trip, which is unusual.
I was going to ask you, how many people in total did you have on your trip?
We had 31 in our group. Actually, there was 74. There was 31 in our group. There was 33 in the other group. So they split us into 2 groups because it was so large. So you can see that tourism is a big part of Turkey.
So you travel basically with a group all the time?
All the time. You never know who you're going to meet up with until you get to the country. For example, the last visit we went to, where was it?
Oh, you did the mountain.
Well, okay, that was only 14 also, but that wasn't through Gate 1. All these trips are through Gate 1, which is probably the best tour group that I've ever found from the standpoint of cost and taking care of you from the time you get off the airplane until you get back on the airplane. You're in their hands. You have no worries.
Right.
And the hotels they pick are 4- and 5-star hotels in most cases. The food was excellent. I mean, I gained 6 pounds on a trip, which was really too much. The buffets were too good, too good. And you have to be careful because there's so much to eat. And so, good trip.
Sounds like you had a lot of fun. Jim, I'm going to raise the drink, one more drink to you for having a great time.
It was a great time.
Now, your next trip is where?
To Thailand.
Thailand.
And it's next week, I believe.
Oh, geez. This guy's constantly on the road.
Got to keep going.
Jim, I want to thank you for joining us. It's been a great little interview, and we'd like to have you come back and see us after your next trip.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.